Okay, we're still waiting on a few more people to show up because we don't quite have quorum. If we don't have quorum, we can't continue. But we always have some business to take care of in the beginning, so let's take care of that, and hopefully a few more committee members come on board. So today, hopefully you can see my screen. It has the agenda on there, sharing the screen there. We're talking about the IMC, the IPC, the IFGC. This is the code hearing number 1 of 2 for those. So hopefully that's what you're here for. For the committee members, we ask that you please do turn on your camera. We want to simulate this being as if we were in person as much as possible. We also ask that you please mute yourself unless you are speaking. The chat function is enabled for the committee members only, and we ask that you please refrain from using the chat function. Just like if you're in a meeting, we probably don't want to be chatting with each other unless it's for the good of the order. If it's for the good of the order, please go ahead and use the chat function. We will have a timer that we will be utilizing, and that will show up on the screen as needed. And I'll go through that a little bit later, but an example of that is about halfway through, we'll take a 5 or 10 minute break. So you all can do whatever you need to do, check emails, check text, go to the restroom, grab a bite to eat, whatever you need to do. Let's see, today we have subject matter expert is Shauna. She's on the line with us today. And our note taker today is Charlie. So Charlie will be helping and Shauna will be helping. If you don't recognize those names, that's who they are. So let me go over how we do things on the proposal so everybody's familiar with this. I do this at the beginning of each hearing just so anybody from the general public who's not familiar becomes familiar with how we do things. What will happen is we're going to follow the Roberts Rules of Order. The proposal will be introduced by the moderator, which is myself. Then we'll ask the proponent to speak on that proposal. We ask that you please just give a quick introduction of where you're from, and then just give us a summary of the proposal. Everybody should already have the opportunity to read the proposal and do their homework, so no need to go into great detail on that. From there, we will go to the general public and ask if anybody wants to speak in support of the proposal. They will have a 2-minute timer to speak their mind on that. Once everybody has spoken their mind in support, we will ask the general public if anybody wants to speak in opposition of the proposal. They will also have 2 minutes to do so. After all of those have been spoken for on that, we go to the committee. The committee will then have time to ask questions about the proposal. From there, if somebody spoke up in support or opposition during the public portion of it, we will ask if anybody from the general public wants to have a rebuttal in support. They will have 1 minute of rebuttal time. After everybody has spoken in rebuttal and support, we will have any rebuttals in opposition. They will also have 1 minute. From there, we go back to the committee, and the committee, that would be your time to have any discussion. Whether you want to make a modification, you want to make a motion, anything like that. And then once our motion is on the table, I'll call a vote, we will vote, and then that will be the end of it. So the way that we are able to communicate with each other, because we are doing this virtually, we do that via raising our hands. So I want everybody on the committee and in the general public to raise their hand on the Zoom. There should be a button to make sure that you're able to do so, because that's how we vote, that's how we communicate, that's how we want to be able to say, I want to speak. So go ahead and use that function, make sure you can do that while we're still waiting. Charlie, in a minute, I'll have you do a little roll call. Okay, let's see, panelists. I see everybody on the panel so far can raise their hand. I see there's a couple people raising their hands in the general public. That's great. Okay, go ahead and lower your hands. We're done. We're good with that. I think I had all the notes that I wanted to speak on, we've spoken on. So I'll go to our note taker, Charlie, and see if we have quorum.
As of right now, unfortunately, we don't have quorum. We only have 6 voting members. I'll quickly call out the names of those I don't have accounted for in attendance, just in case if anybody's subbing or if you're on the attendees side, which I checked and I don't see anybody there. But the names are Gary Cardenas, Austin McMarrick, Frank Gonzalez, and Louis Jugert.
Okay, anybody filling in for those three? Maybe you got the wrong link and you're on the general public side. Go ahead and raise your hand. So otherwise, we will wait a few
Kevin?
more minutes to see if we do get quorum. Yes.
Kevin, I just double checked with Erica because I thought that it was 50% plus one to meet quorum. And she said that it has to be more than half. So 50% plus one. But I don't, and you say we have 11. So we'd need 6, 7. I guess we still don't meet quorum. I don't know. 6 is 50% plus one, not really 6.5 plus one would be, I don't know.
Let me call Lewis.
That's good.
I'm going to call Lewis and Frank real quick and see if they're planning on joining.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chuck.
So in the meantime, I guess everybody hold tight.
Don't we have a couple of proposals from the fire that we can discuss?
Yes, there we go. We can finish up our IFC.
Maybe we can go over the fire comments. And
Away, Michael.
what's that?
How far is the pump room away from the building?
Oh. No.
75 feet.
Oh, you guys are sitting on too many committees. It's all sounding the same.
I was hoping to be 75 meters, but
Wow. That's funny. So we almost got through all of those fire proposals.
I was impressed actually because I thought we were going to have a few more meetings like last time.
Oh, we got through what, 16 for that last hearing. Woof. Good stuff.
It's energy who needs that. That help.
Yeah, probably. You know, no matter where you're at, energy always needs that. Even at the national level, energy gets their own hearings all to themselves. So, well, it's craziness. But I think it's
how is that going? Is it done or still going?
no.
No.
At either level, at the national level, it's still going, and at the local level, it's still going.
You know, I did use it as a, I wouldn't say joke, but I was joking about it that I thought the fire was bad, but I think the energy.
Well, you know, energy touches
cycle.
energy touches every aspect of the building. So you have to really take your time to make sure that it coordinates with, you know, building and mechanical. I mean, like it touches every aspect. So you really do have to take a little more time to keep conflicts out and stuff. So.
And the wide range. I mean, you guys can take an awful lot of time talking about high-rise issues, but that's a small fraction of the actual buildings, right? And
Right.
what's, and I'm not even on the committee. I'm just kind of following what's going on. What's baking my brain is all the, you know, the residential stuff, which.
Yeah. Yeah. But the same is happening at the national level.
Oh, yeah.
In writing the 2024 right now. It's just, oh, craziness.
For the energy, Sana?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they had to break it out.
I like the energy code because it's the thinnest out of all the codes so far.
Well, that used to be. Not so much anymore. I think the plumbing code maybe is the smallest now. I don't know. Energy code, the 2021 energy code is as big as almost the IRC. Well, 1, 2.
All right, so I just talked to Lewis, and he's out in the field, will not be able to join us. And Frank, I didn't get a hold of him. So I'd say they're both not going to make it today.
Okay, who else is on the committee? Jeff?
So how close are we to quorum? We need 6 and we have, or we need 5.5.
We need one more person.
So it looks like, okay, Mark, Brian Kennedy, Gary Cardenas. Well, I don't know if I have an updated list. Jeff Corral or something like that with Denver.
We can ask for a volunteer from the public. So no, I'm kidding.
Right. Or you could have had what's his Frank or Lewis could have appointed somebody to take their spot, right? Isn't that
Yep.
allowed? Mhm. But it would have had to been somebody that had reviewed it. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, because 6 of the members are from Denver.
So if there are 11 voting members, why isn't 6 a majority?
Well, do we have 6?
We got 50% plus 1 would be what we need.
Yeah, let's
Can I get an overrule from Eric?
Yeah, I mean, we could get an overrule for Eric. Erica just said it has to be more than 50%.
Which
Okay.
it is.
Mhm.
So 5.5 people, 6, I guess is more than 50%. I don't know. I think that Eric Browning had it in writing what he wanted, and so I can't find those anywhere.
Here's another question. Is it 50% plus 1 of committee members or voting members? Because at least on my attendance sheet, I have Jeff as a non-voting committee member.
Oh,
If it's off of just voting members, we would have the 50% plus 1.
yeah, I bet that it is of voting members, but is that in Teams or something where that's written up? Do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm scouring through some things here and writing Erica and see if we can
Hey,
somehow
Eric,
make this
I have a
work.
quick question for you.
Oh, he's gonna
So-
ask Eric. Good. Yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately it's Eric's call. I know they wrote it up in a presentation that we gave each committee, but I don't know where that is at. Somewhere in the Teams folder, probably.
Okay, it looks like we're going to get the okay here.
There it is. Orientation.
All right, per Eric, we can roll if we have 6, as long as we have more than half.
All right, great. So
Good,
thank you everybody
awesome.
for being here. We'll move forward. Sorry for that hiccup. It's always one of those things. Okay, so let's see. Well, we got somebody else joining too, which is great. All right, so let's introduce item number 6 on the agenda, which is, sorry. Did anybody have any questions before we get started?
Well, I was just, this is Shauna, and I was just wondering, I feel like we came to an agreement on item number F, but just in case we didn't, is there a way to put item F and item H on your agenda together, since they both deal with ventilation, so that we can talk about them at the same time and not have an elevator proposal in between there? So that would be
Yes, we can do
P 15.1 and item number 1. So F and H. Just put them together.
Sure. So let's start with a vote there. So all those committee members in favor of combining agenda item F and agenda item H together, please raise your hand. Okay, I have 6. Go ahead and lower your hands. That's majority, so we will go ahead and do that. Any other questions before we roll into item number 6? Okay, seeing none. Item number 6 is Chuck. I believe you're going to introduce or give us a summary of this. Why don't you go ahead and start while I bring it up on the screen.
Yes, thanks, Kevin. So this proposal is to help clarify 1106.5. Currently in the base code, they have the requirement for the scuppers to be sized by the equivalent circumference of a roof drain. Well, roof drains can be multiple different circumferences of their flat roof or flat roofs, etc. And it doesn't really define which part of the roof drain is required to be used for that calculation. So we reached out to the proponent multiple times in the last year, and it came back that the intended circumference was the strainer circumference. And if you actually use that circumference, it really oversizes the scupper compared to what has typically been used. So we brought forward the Francis equation that's been in the IPC commentary for years and typically used by designers here in Denver for design on the scuppers. And so the intent is to clarify the circumference and then bring the Francis formula forward as an optional compliance path. And that's pretty much it.
Can I ask a question real quick, Chuck?
Sure.
When I look at your 110652, for some reason I thought it was an option, but it's not worded as an option. How is it worded as I see. Never mind. 1106.5. I remembered that it was always going to be an option, but in 1106.5 it says in accordance with 5.1 or 5.2. I answered my own question. Sorry. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so committee members, hold tight. We're going to go to the general public. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody that wants to speak in support of this, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll go to opposition. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition of this proposal, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will go back to the committee. Committee, this is your time to ask questions and questions only to the proponent. Does anybody on the committee have any questions? Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is, what is considered the strainer when determining the circumference? Is that the dome of the roof drain, which may be manufacturer specific?
Yeah, it is manufacturer specific, which is a challenge. But yeah, it's the base of the roof drain, or where the strainer, the width of the strainer at the roof drain.
Okay, next question comes from Mark.
Hi. Yeah, I share the skepticism that using this circumference of the grate is the right way to do it. I'm glad we have put in the code this Francis formula. I would actually recommend that why don't we just, if we're going to make this a better and more clear thing, let's just get rid of the circumference and require the Francis formula. There's just a yes, first of all, I concur that the circumference, because we're talking the circumference, not just the width, but so you got and most of these things come in at like, 18 inches diameter. A standard Zern or Wade drain has got a body about 18 inches, and the different domes provide different flow rates, so it really doesn't have much to do with that. You'll get a 4-inch roof drain with a 18-inch diameter. You'll get an 8-inch roof drain with an 18-inch diameter. So it doesn't have an awful lot to do with the flow area. But it absolutely, I think I didn't do the numbers, should be conservative, because you're using the circumference, right? 3 times 3.415 times 18 is a lot. I don't know. I just suggest that we just simplify it, go with a real engineering formula, and make it an engineering based thing rather than just it looks like it ought to be all right.
Okay, so since it's the question period, I'll follow up with the question. Chuck, as the proponent there, are you okay with deleting the 1106.5.1? It sounds like that Mark is referring to. Would you be open to that?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything Mark said. My only hesitation to do that is that that specific requirement is in the base code.
Correct.
And it is a less complex method of sizing. So if there was a situation where somebody really wanted to just use that method, since it is in base code and we're giving, it's only an option, I don't see the harm in leaving it. It does add a little confusion because now there's 2 different options, but there is an either or, and so you're not required to use it.
Okay, so committee can keep that in mind when we get to the next portion of the hearing here. And if you want to make a modification, someone can do that and we can vote on that if you feel strongly enough about that. Next question comes from Matt. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, so Chuck, if someone were to use that equivalent circumference method to comply, how should they go about demonstrating compliance to you? And then in the future, if someone needed to make modifications to same building, would that information be lost? How would they back justify the existing size of a scupper?
Yeah, those are great points, because I mean, when we first reached out to the proponent who put this in the code, this was new in 2018, and so it's been carried to the 2021 code. And so this year, there's been a couple instances where we've been asked, what is the circumference that's used for sizing? Is it the pipe to the pipe to the roof drain? Is it the roof drain circumference? Is it the strainer on the roof drain? And so we reached out to the proponent. The proponent said the intent was for the circumference of the strainer. And when actually sizing a scupper using that, it just was ridiculously oversized. So internally, we then told the engineer, if you use the Francis formula and use engineering judgment, you can show compliance. But will that information be recorded on the building somewhere or something so future designers would know how the roof drain was sized? No, I mean, I guess it would probably be on the set of drawings kept at the city of Denver, but there wouldn't be any way of future designers who are modifying the building to know how that roof drain was sized based on the manufacturer's spec.
Right, next question comes from Brian.
I had a question on the part 2, the Francis formula and the diagram and the table there. This comes from the commentary on the IPC, if I remember correctly. but I think there's a few missing pieces and parts to the diagram. Isn't there the actual Francis formula and some definition of what all the variables are?
You know, I don't have the commentary in front of me. You may be correct. And so I would, if we agree to approve this method, we could agree to approve this proposal, and we would verify that those definitions and formulas get added to the amendments to make sure there's nothing left out.
Any other questions from the committee? Being none, we will go to our next section. Being that there was nobody that wanted to speak in support or opposition from the general public, we will not go to any rebuttals from the general public. So that means now we go into open discussion with the committee members. So committee members, this is your time to have any further discussion. If you didn't get to ask your question before, you can ask it now. Or you can make a motion. If anybody's ready to make a motion, we can do that. Matt, go ahead.
So when researching this, I noticed, so in the past, the code has been amended to follow the 2012 version for sizing of roof drains, which relies on roof area to determine the size of lines that serve roof drains. I was looking in this is a bit unrelated, but it's tangential to how this Francis formula may be used. In the base amendments, I think the rainfall per hour was reduced to 2.4 as opposed to 3. Does this sound familiar to others?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so I'm wondering about that relative to this. You know, we can I'm trying to make sure that this is clear to still use. So are we going to be using that 2.4 number to then develop a gallons per minute of flow rate to the scupper and simply follow through with the Francis formula? If we do so, I think it would be wise to have in here the complete formula so that if someone needed to you know, illustrate something that's not part of the table value, they could do so.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Any
I think we should add the supporting equation into this amendment. Make sure it's included in the proposal.
Yeah, and then Chuck, my thought on that is the way that someone would demonstrate compliance to you if you were asking for sizing on this, would they would start with the rainfall per hour, develop the GPM, and submit to you something that shows that equation satisfied with this table. So.
Yep.
Okay, to keep things moving, Matt, do you want to make a motion to add that? I believe it's the equation for the Francis formula into this proposal.
Well, yes, I need to. I guess I'm not sure exactly which piece of it is missing from the commentary.
Can I offer? If
Sure.
this is Shauna, if the committee is leaning towards approving this but needs modification, if you give your intent really clearly, I will work with Chuck to write it. That way we don't have to postpone it and bring it back. If we know that you want to deal with, you know, the modified rainfall amount and put in the right formula, the right equation, and the full commentary for that Francis formula, if we know that those are your full intent, you can vote if you're leaning towards. I'm not giving you direction one way or another, but if you're leaning towards approving it, as long as those changes are made, you can approve it, and we will meet your intent in rewriting it. If there's other modifications, we just need to know your full intent so that you don't have to write it on the fly.
Sean, sorry to interrupt. I have the commentary if I can share that for a second, just so everybody can see what it is. Is that okay to do that?
All right. Yep, go right ahead.
This is the 2015 commentary. I believe this is where you got the table and the diagram from, Chuck. And then,
Yes,
I'm
it's
not
been,
yet
Brian.
seeing it.
I'm sorry.
Not yet seeing it.
Oh, you're not seeing it?
No.
Okay.
There it is.
There we go.
there it is.
So this, I think, is the piece that's missing down here.
Mhm.
Okay.
Agreed.
So if that were the case, then I guess I would make a motion to amend the proposal to include the entire section from the commentary, and to approve as amended.
Mhm.
Okay, is there a
I'll
second?
second. I'll second.
Okay, Michael seconds. Any other discussion? None. Shauna, I'm going to lower your hand. Okay, so there is a motion to approve with. Sorry, let me rephrase that. There's a motion to approve with a future amendment to add with the intent to amend with the section from the commentary. All those in favor, hold on, sorry, jump the gun. Charlie, let's see how many voting members we have now so we know what we're working with. I know we were jumping around there a little bit.
Yeah, we have 7 members.
7 voting members, okay. Thank you. All right, so all those in favor, please raise your hand. I have 7. Go ahead and lower your hands. That's unanimous. So I will not ask for anybody else's vote. So we'll move on. Thank you. Okay, next item of business is number P28.1, which is Brett. I don't think I have Brett on the line. Is somebody going to represent Brett instead? If so, raise your hand. Let's see anybody.
Yeah.
Chuck, are you going to?
Yeah, I can speak to this.
Okay, go ahead. So I'll bring it up on the screen and go ahead and give us a summary of P28.1.
So this is a modification to an existing amendment that we have. And it clarifies that a single ejector pump may be used in commercial applications when it's used for a single exam room sink or break room sink and the associated dishwasher disposer. The current amendment reads a single-use kitchen sink, and that's been misunderstood to be a commercial kitchen sink, like a 3-compartment sink or a prep sink or something in a commercial kitchen, which is not something that this amendment was intended for. And so it's just a clarification to help identify that it's really intended for a break room sink or an exam sink, not a required plumbing fixture that such as a commercial kitchen sink.
Okay, thanks for the summary and thanks for filling in for Brett. All right, general public, anybody that wants to speak in support of this, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support? Seeing none, I'll go to opposition. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition? Third and final call, anybody that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll go to the committee. Committee, this is your time to ask questions. Are there any questions about this proposal? Mark, your hand's up.
Yes, Chuck, I understand what you're trying to do here. You're going down the dangerous road, though, of identifying things that are allowed when, you know, there's a whole list of things that might be. You mentioned beverage bar as an example in your supporting information, yet beverage bar isn't mentioned. If that is indeed something that's allowable, there's another item you've got to put in your list of allowable things. So anyway, the question would be, are you intending to try to limit the amount of items here that can be served with a single pump, or would you want to consider some language that says, when used for sinks or fixtures not otherwise required by the Denver Building Code or the Denver Health? That was one of your points, is that these are non-required fixtures. Is that enforceable? I'm looking for something enforceable, and I'm okay with limiting it to a small list. I just think about the enforcement angle.
And I'll be 100% transparent, Mark. I'm representing Brett, so I'm reading the substantiation now.
Okay, so that's unfortunately we don't have Brett here to comment on that, but if that's something that you feel strong enough, to do as a committee, someone can make that motion to change that or add that. So we'll give the rest of the committee time to think that over, and we'll move to the next question because we have some other hands up. Michael, you're up next.
Yeah, so speaking from a recent experience with this issue, I think the intent is, if it's a kitchen sink, it will need to go to a commercial kitchen sink. It will need to go to a grease interceptor, and it's not really allowed to go through the pump first. So I do agree with Mark, there's probably other fixtures there. But basically, whatever fixtures is a single use of some sort and don't require a grease interceptor. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Next up is our subject matter expert for today, Shauna.
Yeah, I'm just listening to the concerns here, and without the proponent here, I would just offer that the simple fix might be to just say applications when it is used for a single exam room or break room sink, comma, or similar, comma, and associated. That way it leaves it up to you have something similar, but it's not taking you into kitchen.
Okay, thanks. So the committee can ponder that. Any other questions? This is question period. Any other questions from the committee? Being none, and being that there were no participants from the general public that spoke up in support or opposition, we'll go to the discussion period for the committee. Committee members, this is your time to have further discussion and or to make a motion. Matt, your hand's up first.
Yeah, so looking at this, I'm thinking about parallel terminology for things like a range hood, right? So when it's used for domestic use, I think the idea of tying this to does it or does it not require a grease interceptor makes sense. Maybe the idea of having a little bit more specificity, I think, is helpful here, because you'd hate to make it all the way to the permit review to find out that you needed this extra thing that's going to be difficult to engineer into the building. My thoughts on this were to instead of the underlying terms in here to state that it's a hand sink, beverage sink, or domestic sink with the associated dishwasher and or disposer. The word domestic being that it's something like a sink in a break room or a sink in a conference room or something like that should not be seeing a large amount of food waste. That would be allowed I think that's what the intent of this is after, is it's not coming out of a commercial kitchen. It's meant for those types of applications. But I do think some level of specificity would be helpful here, so that designers have something to lean on. But understood, there's a lot there that just because it does or doesn't need to go to a grease interceptor may not be the exact intent, is kind of where my head's at.
No,
Okay.
your understanding of the intent is right on.
Okay.
My concern about using the word domestic is it sort of indicates or leans towards residential. And if it's a commercial application, is it still domestic?
Right, and Chuck, that's kind of where I kind of went there because of something like a range hood. So when a domestic range hood or something that's used for domestic purposes is located in a commercial building, it's treated differently than if it was used for commercial purposes. So I was thinking about the parallel there and trying to tie those together. So curious what others
Sure, and
think.
I'll ask our subject matter expert, Shauna. I believe, you know, when we're talking about quote unquote domestic in the commercial application, there is a domestic water heating, or is that service water heating? I'll give you a minute to look that up. We'll go to the next question, which is, or next discussion point, which is Michael.
Yeah, I would recommend to say non-grease and maybe use what Shauna said, similar.
Okay, Michael, would you like to make a motion on that, or you just wanted that for discussion for the committee?
Yeah, I would like it for discussion. Maybe I'll hear what Mark has
Okay.
to say, or Brian. Mhm.
All right, great. Mark, you're up next.
Okay, I'm going to go to intent here. There's one important word yes, and it's left in here, and that is a single sink. So the intent seems to be that there's only one fixture of whatever type we're talking about hooked up to this simplex pump. That's an important point. So if that's indeed what we want to do, okay, it's going to be somewhat limiting. This building that had a problem with gravity drainage might end up with multiple single simplex pumps. Okay, so that's first concept. The other was the non-required part of it, and that's more in the supporting information. So what maybe Matt mentioned lavatories. Well, lavatories are a required device. If you can't wash your hands, there's something wrong. If you can't, make some coffee, it's not as big of a deal. So let's just consider or we're going to stick with this concept of A, single fixture, and B, something that if it failed isn't a code problem.
All right. Next one up is Brian.
I guess I just had a question on the intent of the original amendment. Was it just to limit food waste devices like and grease waste? Is that it, or were there other fixtures that you were trying to limit this applicability to?
Well, the original intent of the amendment is to allow a single break room sink, like in a high rise where you may not have access to the floor below, or it might be difficult to route the plumbing to the stacks, to allow them to use a simplex ejector on the floor in a tenant finish remodel, or in like an older building where there's a challenge to get plumbing to a. The intent was not to have this as like a widely used exception, and the intent is to really have most fixtures go through a duplex ejector. Any required fixture, like a restroom, lavatory, any fixture in a commercial kitchen that's required by health has to go through a duplex. The intent was really just to give a small exception to like break room sinks or something that's not required during tenant finishes.
Right. So then I guess I think it's a great clarification. I would just be worried that it's limiting to, like, let's say you have a conference room with a sink in it. Does that count as a exam room or a break room? Maybe not. or a mother's room or something with a sink in it. Does that count? I don't know.
Yeah, I would say all of the above would count. And so I would if the committee feels like this is too limiting, I think Shauna's original suggestion of just or similar is sort of broad, but would allow the interpretation of motherroom sink or conference room sink to be installed. But if somebody tried to apply it to a 3-compartment sink in a commercial kitchen, well, that's not similar. So it would,
Or entire bathroom group or something.
yeah.
In all honesty, Jack, you cannot really do that anyways because you have a grease interceptor ahead of it. So it's impossible to put the grease interceptor and the sewage sump pump after that.
Yeah, it's funny because at a DIA there was trouble getting fall in a kitchen, and you'd be surprised how many hand sinks they wanted to run through Simplex, and we had this whole discussion on this.
That was our project. And the owner called it the thawing sink.
Can
Yeah,
so
Okay.
this is Shauna. I would say that, first of all, to the question of domestic, it's an appropriate term to use because, first of all, there are other occupancies besides just an office or something that this might apply to. And so domestic is used a lot. Like he said, you could have domestic range hood, or you could have a commercial hood applied in a commercial building. So the use of the word domestic is okay. What I would say is that instead of going with the type of room that it might be in or similar, the type of sink, as was suggested, a hand sink, a beverage sink, you could say domestic sink, or you could just say hand sink, beverage sink, or similar. That would leave it open instead of the type of room that it might be in, like an exam room or a break room. You could just say the type of sink, a hand sink or a beverage sink. You could say because that's this kind of, a hand sink is what you're going to see in an exam room, right? Or those types of things. So the type of sink or similar would be appropriate. And so I would suggest that it's and I don't know if the word single actually needs to be in there, but you could leave it. You could say when it's used for a single hand sink, beverage sink, or domestic sink or similar, or you don't have to use the word domestic if you feel it's going to cause confusion, but a single hand sink, beverage sink, or similar fixture and associated dishwasher and or disposal.
Okay, next up is Matt.
Yeah, so that makes perfect sense. And I think to Mark's point, the word single was meant such that only one fixture is connected to the pump. So you wouldn't take more than one fixture and try to run them to the pump.
Yep.
So I think the word single does have some value there. I think that's getting at the original intent. But I think maybe where we're headed is trying to identify enough context here that somebody could understand whether something does or doesn't fall into that category. So hand sink, that's a pretty common term. You do find that in kitchens. You find that in exam rooms. Bar sink is something you find that's associated with beverages. Break sink or break room sink. I know that's talking about the room it's in, but it tells at least us as a designer something about the function you're thinking of. So maybe those 3 items within or similar would at least provide some context for the kind of things that are acceptable here. Curious to hear others.
Okay, Matt. So did you want to make a motion to modify that?
I think Mark had a point to make. You have your hand up, Mark. Did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. And do I need to tap chair recognize me? I'll assume they have. Anyway, the one thing that I just want to make sure that we know, I like, first of all, I concur that we ought to keep a single, because that, first of all, that will disincentivize people trying to do an entire floor of, through a simplex pump. Okay. Now, what about the required part of it? I don't have a huge problem with this, but that was in the substantiation, which is why I'm bringing it up. Hand sinks or hand labs, whatever you want to call them, they are indeed a required item. And in fact, that's in the same category of exam rooms. The reason that there is a hand lav in an exam room is because it's required by health department regulations, if nothing else. Now, if it's limited to a single unit, to a single fixture, I think I'm okay with that, with all those required type of fixtures, because if it fails, the one person who's using it knows that it failed. They may not know that it was a pump that failed. It could have been a clogged drain. It had been the same fail. So I'm good with the listing and the or similar. I was going to consider, if the committee thinks that it ought to be only unrequired fixtures, then the terminology could be or similar fixtures used for convenience purposes and not required by building code or health department for consideration.
All right, Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, Mark, you brought up a good point with the exam sink. I'm worried about allowing something to be on a single pump that is a required fixture. So I would almost move to strike the exam room, leave the break room sink, and say or similar, and associated dishwasher and disposer, and leave it at that. But I'm curious what Danny's input is.
I agree with that. I agree with what Mark and you just mentioned. I believe the intent of this, because it is allowed in the base code, we added on to that. So a building would not be not in compliance if if one pump failed. So if it's a required fixture, it needed to have that extra redundancy. That is what I believe the intent of the original amendment to the base code was.
Okay. So does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve as amended, and I would approve to propose to amend by deleting the exam room or portion. And then add or similar after break room sink. And that's good.
Okay, did I capture it?
Yep.
On the screen, okay. Okay. Any other discussion? Anybody want to make a second on that? Second call for a second.
I'll second, yeah.
Okay, Mark seconds. Okay, any other discussion?
To move it on, would I add a couple words at this point, or shall we approve this and then add a couple of words to what we just approved?
No, we can go ahead and do it, and we can vote on it separately or all together. So let's go ahead and add
those couple of words or similar fixtures where where Chuck left off, used for convenience purposes and not required by the building code or health department. It'd be if we wanted to highlight the non-required part of this.
Could you just make it more simple by saying, just a suggestion, Mark, provided but not otherwise required?
Ah, good language, concur.
I like it.
So you could take out for convenience purposes.
Now that, right.
Right,
yep.
that wouldn't be.
I couldn't, that was my shot at it. Right, that's better.
Did I capture that correctly? Okay. Chuck, are you okay with that additional change to your motion? Okay, and Mark, and since you seconded it and that was your recommendation, we're good, okay. Any other discussion? Jonna, go ahead.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Can you put, let's see, I just want to make sure, let's see, for a single break room sink or similar fixtures provided but not otherwise required. I'm just wondering if there has to be a comma there, because so that the associated dishwasher disposal applies to all of it and not just that last part of the sentence. And so I just don't want the associated dishwasher and disposal to only go with similar fixtures. If it goes, yeah. Now it applies. Now the and associated dishwasher applies to everything in that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. Matt, you're up next.
Yeah, apologies. I was trying to rewrite this on the fly. I think it just reads very confusing. So a single break room sink or similar fixtures provided by another, not otherwise required, and associated dishwasher or disposer. You know, to me, break room sink and associated dishwasher and or disposer are two things that go together. So I was trying to put those together. Let me see if I can put something in the chat that might illustrate what I'm talking about.
Okay. But I think for all intensive purposes, that was the intent, is to split those up. I could be wrong, Chuck and Mark, if you want to comment on that.
No, Matt has the right intent, and it is sort of confusing to have the, because I think we could leave it break room sink or similar fixtures and the associated dishwasher and or disposer that are provided but not otherwise required. So,
But then it sounds like the dishwasher and disposer are what's not what's provided and not otherwise required. That's the hard part, is
yeah,
trying.
it's,
So I just placed something in the chat. Does that clarify this? So what I'm trying to state here is the break room sink is what we would expect to find with the dishwasher and or disposer or similar fixtures provided but not otherwise required.
Yeah.
Does that meet the intent that was described previously?
yeah, no, that meets the intent for sure.
Okay. Mark, you okay with that since you seconded it? Okay, I see the head nod. Okay, any other further discussion? Seeing none, I will call a vote. So this is to approve as amended. So we're going to vote completely on this, the amendment and approving this. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. I see 7, that's unanimous. Okay, it passes. Thank you. Go ahead and lower your hands. Okay, next item up is 28.2. Chuck, I believe that one's also yours. Go ahead and give us a summary on that while I pull it up on the screen.
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. The 2021 IPC now has 2 new sections. It talks about relining existing building sewer piping, and then also cast in place relining of sewer piping. And so I reached out to our partners in wastewater, and they don't always allow this to take place as a means of remediation. And so the intent of this is just add the sentence to direct the constituent they must get Denver wastewater approval before proceeding forward, to just make sure that permit and that approval is obtained.
Okay, thanks for the summary. I'll go to the general public first. General public, anybody that wants to speak in support of this, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll go to opposition. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Anybody that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll go back to the committee. Committee, this is your time to ask questions and questions only. Anybody from the committee have questions? Seeing none, I will ask anybody who wants to have any discussion from the committee. This is now your opportunity to have discussion or make a motion. Michael, you're up first.
Yeah, just a quick question. So are they basically required to pull a permit? Is that the intent, Chuck?
They would be required to pull up, depends if it's inside the building, they would be required to pull a plumbing permit, and then the exterior or the building sewer piping outside the building is SUDP, so they would require a wastewater permit.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly how anybody will be doing that work, but I mean, it will be on the code. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Any other discussion, or anybody want to make a motion? Okay. I'll ask again. Anybody want to make a motion? Chuck, go ahead.
Motion to approve as submitted.
Okay. Mark, go ahead.
Second.
Great. Any other discussion? Any other discussion from the committee at this point? Seeing none, I will call a vote. There is a motion to approve as written and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I see 7, unanimous. Go ahead and lower your hands. That was a nice and quick one. So we'll move, let's see how time check. We're still doing good on time. We'll go to the next item, which is P9.1. This is supposed to be Mary. I don't believe Mary was going to be able to attend. She said that either Helen or Robert can give us a summary on the proposal. I don't know. I think they both want to speak in one way of the proposal as well. But Helen or Robert, do one of you want to take Mary's spot to give us a summary? You will still be able to give your testament independently. Do you want to raise your hand if you want to give us a summary on this proposal 9.1? I'll allow Helen. Looks like you want to do that. Helen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then give us a quick summary of the proposal. Please hold it to just a summary. We'll allow you to give testament later on.
Thank you. My name is Helen Walter-Terranoni. I'm the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at the Air Conditioning, Heating and Refrigeration Institute, which represents more than 300 manufacturers of HVAC-R, so heating, ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration, and water heating equipment. This proposal basically would kind of realign building codes with the needed changes to allow for next generation refrigerants to be used in air conditioning in compliance with the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act of 2020. So that's the federal law that mandates that hydrofluorocarbons, so HFCs, be phased down in the United States. And so because of that, these transitions will need to take place in the coming years. In addition, I would note that the state of Colorado also has regulations in place that require that the refrigerants in chillers, so the big cooling units in commercial buildings, transition in 2024. We have made this proposal so that the building codes are updated to allow for the use of these new refrigerants.
Okay, thank you, Helen, for that summary. I'm going to put you back on mute for a minute. Okay, we do have a question from our subject matter expert before we continue. Shauna, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. I'm going to ask real quick if I can share my screen, Kevin.
Sure, let me stop sharing mine and then you should have the ability to do so.
Okay. Hopefully you see that now. When I did some research on this proposal, there were a couple things that I noticed that I thought maybe we could change now instead of in the having to change it again in the 2024. So if you look at the proposal, it's proposing to change a reference standard in the IMC. The same proposal was heard at the national level going into the 2024 and passed. So you will see that this this reference to the 2019 edition of the UL CSA 60335, which is what they're proposing in the IMC, passed. It passed. Oops, sorry, that's showing you a different proposal for later. It passed unanimously and it didn't get any public comment. So if we approve this, it would mirror within the 2024, so we don't have to change it then. What I want to show you though is the residential code. So their residential code is proposing to remove the reference to the 22.2. The 2024, this is what was approved for the 2024 by these same proponents. And so I would just say what they're proposing right now to go into year 2021 removes that reference to the 2022 or the 22.2. And I would just ask if, because this is what was approved for the 2024, if we might mirror this and bring back that 22.2 so that we don't have to turn around and change it again in 2024. I talked to the proponents ahead of time. They said that they were okay matching what's in the 2024 instead of the 2021. And so this is what got approved. And I just wanted to point that out. And that way, when the proponents have a chance to testify, maybe they could address this issue. Like I say, the mechanical code reference that they're proposing is exactly what's going to be in the 24, but the residential mechanical isn't. So just want to ask them to please address that in their comments. And I will quit sharing my screen. Maybe. There you go.
Okay, thank you, Shauna. So with that being said, I will go over to the general public. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. We have Robert, you're up first. Robert, you should be allowed to speak. Go ahead, please introduce yourself, and you will have a 2-minute timer on the clock, on the screen.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Robert Glass. I'm the manager of state regulatory affairs for Dynkit Comfort Technologies. In support of the proposals as they're put forward, to the point that Shauna made as far as updating things to reference the 2024 codes, maybe there's an opportunity. We'd had some communications with Shauna earlier this morning, and I just sent her some updated code language that includes the 2024 updates. So given the opportunity, maybe she could put that up on the screen to address the issue that she raised, as well as it identifies what are the code items that were addressed by ICC. So you've got the items that are there for reference and everything else. And that relates both to the IMC and the IRC updates. So if there's an opportunity, I think it would be good to be able to go ahead and maybe do that. It's not in the format of what you see on the screen, but it has all of the information. So that may be easier to work from to address what Shauna was just bringing up as an issue. As Helen had noted, the changes here are necessary due to the effects of the AIM Act and the ability of going ahead and allowing manufacturers to start selling products that have the A2L refrigerants. As another portion of this, there is actually also legislature currently in Colorado that is addressing the language that would prohibit building codes from disallowing the use of A2L refrigerants. And so this is just to go along with that, to go ahead. That's in an energy bill that is currently in the legislation right now. So again, I'd be glad to answer any questions or help navigate through that document that I just sent Shauna. But thank you for the opportunity to voice the support for these much needed amendments.
Kevin, those were sent to you too. If you have the opportunity to pull up your email, they were sent to you as well, so that you could share them.
Great,
easier.
thank you. Okay, next hand up to speak in support is Helen. Helen, you can probably unmute now, and you will have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you for this opportunity. Again, I'm not sure it's necessary for me to speak on this. I just wanted to say that we do support, Shauna's identified this issue around the 2024 codes, and we do support aligning with the codes. As she noted, our proposals were accepted unanimously. And so certainly, if it's easier for Denver, we certainly align with adoption of the 2024. I don't know that I need to say more than Robert said, but happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from the general public that wants to speak in support? Third and final call, anybody else from the general public that wants to speak in support? Seeing none, I'll go to opposition. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition of this, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition of this proposal, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition. Seeing none, I'll go back to the committee. Committee, this is your time to ask questions. Please limit it to questions at this time. Danny, your hand's up first.
Okay, so we are we use the IMC and ASHRAE 15 2019 as by reference to comply with the codes. So my question to the proponent is there anything in ASHRAE 15 2019 that speaks to the refrigerant 2L that prohibits you from using it in your equipment?
May I answer? Is that, I'm not sure how this works. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Helen.
Okay, sorry, I'm not sure how this works. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
No, you're good.
So Danny, brilliant question. That's exactly right. ASHRAE 15 has also been updated in the 2019 with its amendments that were incorporated into the 2019 version. And the necessary changes were also adopted into the 2024 IMC and IRC. So, you know, to Shauna's point, that's all been included there, and nothing there precludes anyone from using these next generation refrigerants.
All right, next question comes from Mark.
Yeah, yes, I am familiar with, first of all, what's in the 2021 IMC for A2L refrigerants. Right now, it's under the 2021, it's only required, or it's only allowed in chillers with some fairly restrictive requirements. The room's got to be class 1 div 2 and or a huge amount of ventilation air. As we move to the 2024, some of those requirements are being more reasonably written. Shauna was showing the one of the proposals that was up there that I believe has indeed been approved, allowing A2L in direct, whatever that term is, but you know, a DX essentially equipment with a lot of restrictions, of course. So even if we include these code references right now, it still won't, the use of an A2L refrigerant in specifically in a direct application will still not be allowed by the IMC. We would have to incorporate the verbiage that's been approved for the 2024 as part of our amendments to the 2021 in order to start applying this equipment, you know, as soon as we can. So that just good, we've got the standards covered, but now we need to cover the actual requirements in Chapter 11 for the special requirements for A2L refrigerants. Which, by the way, if not everyone's familiar with it, A2L means slightly flammable. That's why it's an issue, and therefore needs to also be addressed with the fire department fire code.
Okay, Mark, I just want to remind this question. Do you have a final question in there that you want to ask?
How would we apply this? How would what does this really do for us if we don't include the 2024 requirements?
Okay, so then I will allow Helen to answer that question since she is representing the proponent.
Thank you, Kevin and Mark. In 2025, we believe that by 2025, if not before then, that there will be a mandate federally for a transition to these lower, to this next generation of refrigerants at the federal level. And so without this ability to transition, I'm not sure what the good people of Denver will do. And so we just really need to kind of get everything lined up together. EPA, I should have noted this in the beginning, but EPA has vetted these refrigerants, has looked at these safety standards from an overall safety perspective, added some additional labeling requirements and such, and they have a very careful approach to this for any new refrigerant. So I should mention that as well.
Okay, thank you. Next question comes from Chuck. Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to build on Mark and Danny's question and be a little more specific, because I did look through the proposals that were accepted through into the 2024 IMC, and it appears most of it was just adopting ASHRAE 15 language. There were some instances where it was modified during the adoption process at the national level, and obviously A2L refrigerants have a lot lower global warming potential, and they're going to become much more popular quickly. And so asking the proponent, do you see any concern if we accept this amendment to update the standards and then allow local designers to use ASHRAE 15 base code as the design without updating the mechanical sections themselves?
So Chuck, are you saying that you would, if you were to adopt ASHRAE 15 without updating the code? I'm sorry if I'm not.
No, so I guess the amendments at the national level for the 2024 was pulling a lot of language from ASHRAE 15 into the mechanical code. There were some changes to that language by committee. There was minor tweaks here and there. In the base code of the 2021, 1101.1 something requires that all refrigeration systems meet the mechanical code and ASHRAE 15. And so since A2L is not really addressed very well in the 2021 IMC, I think Denver would probably lean towards allowing our design community to not really use Chapter 11 of the mechanical code, but use ASHRAE 15 for compliance. And I guess I'm just asking, aware of any of the changes that were made in the 2024 IMC that would be necessary for Denver to allow A2L refrigerants in conjunction with ASHRAE 15.
So I may ask Robert to speak for me if you want to get into more detail around this, but I think that there were some improvements in the, like you said, I think it was minor tweaks, more or less, in the 2024 code. But we have made this proposal and written it the way that we have, trying to align as much with the 2024 code and those modifications to ASHRAE 2019 as possible, but they were very, very small changes. And if you were to move forward with just ASHRAE 15, I believe it would be acceptable. But certainly better to align nationally, probably than locally, in my humble opinion.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Shauna.
Yeah, so I guess I just want to be clear. These are great questions. When I was showing the screen, I was trying to show just the standard update, not the code language update that was above it. So just saying that what they're proposing to update is the standard, the ULCSA, to the 2019 version instead of the 2017, and the standard updates in the residential, the IRC mechanical, to the latest versions, and not the update, and not changing the code language. However, if listening to the conversation, I mean, if you could do it a couple ways. If you update the standards, then you could say, all right, now as an alternate method or as some way, we will allow these refrigerants, we will allow these, and we have the standard already listed. We can allow them through ASHRAE, we can allow them as an alternate. We have the standards that you have to meet. Or if you are thinking you need to we have M72 and RM6, which are the proposals that actually bring that language over if you think you need the language brought over, that references how to get to those. But I think that just updating the standards and using ASHRAE 15, the two could work together. But if you, like I said, if you want the language brought over, we could work on that as either an amendment or I don't know. I don't know how we would do that at this point, but I can help you figure it out. I'm not sure what your intent there is, Chuck. I guess I just wanted to say that when I was showing that stuff on the screen, I wasn't looking at the code language that references it. I was just saying, let's get the most recent version of those standards in.
Well, I think Mark's
Okay.
concern, I just think to respond to Shauna, I think the concern is if we're accepting these standards, that's fine. But if the code doesn't support the actual application of these standards, we got a real problem. And right now, the 2024 IMC, there's probably 15 different proposals adding language to Chapter 11 addressing A2L refrigerants. And that's just the mechanical code. I don't know all the updates to the IFC because right now, A2L refrigerants aren't even listed in the refrigeration table in the mechanical code. So there's a lot of updates that aren't being considered, I guess, with this proposal.
All right, any other questions from the committee? Third and final call, any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I will go back, since we had some people speak in support, I will go back to the general public. This is your time to have a rebuttal. So just a reminder, for rebuttals, you get 1 minute each. So general public, anybody that wants to speak as a rebuttal in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. Robert, I see your hand up first, so go ahead and unmute and you will have 1 minute to speak your mind.
Thank you. Call it not rebuttal, but more just additional information. The ASHRAE 15 2019 edition includes the necessary requirements for the installation of products with the A2L refrigerants. The fire code has been updated in the 2024 edition to include maximum allowable quantities of up to 40,000 pounds in controlled areas. So there's been a substantial difference or updates, and most of that had been done as a result of an AHRI research project that was done with the fire service to address what fire first responders needed to go ahead and address. And the bottom line of it was, from a fire service standpoint, there was no difference between A1s and A2Ls. And that's why those quantities were adjusted so much in that in the IFC. And that's my time.
Thank you, Robert. Next hand we have up is Helen. Helen, you should be able to unmute. This is a rebuttal in support or anything else you want to speak your mind on. You'll have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. And again, this is not a rebuttal. I think you're just asking very good questions. So, I did want to mention some of the modifications that have kind of been made have been to align the standards together a little bit more. For example, one standard may have said you can have 40 pounds of charge, and the other one said you could have 39. And so maybe there was more alignment on different things. And those are some things that have kind of been cleaned up, in that 2019 standard, along with what Robert said around installation instructions. And he did note in the IFC that, there was actually a training program developed by firefighters for firefighters with AHRI and Underwriters Laboratory UL. And certainly, if anybody's interested, we would be happy to make that available to folks. But yeah, I think that largely this has just been a lot of cleanup. And, fortunately, the standards basically say the more stringent always rules. So whatever's more stringent always wins the day. So this has just kind of been a lot of cleanup of things. So I hope that is helpful.
Thank you, Helen. Anybody else that wants to have a rebuttal and support, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll move forward. Since there was nobody that spoke in opposition, we won't ask for rebuttals on that. Now we turn it back over to the committee. Committee, this is your time to have further discussion or to make a motion. Mark, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to just state, and we'll come to a motion here shortly, but there's two separate issues here. One is allowing and recognizing the updated standards so that when you reference to find a UL standard, you're at least using the latest one. However, we have additional work to do, and it's probably not part of this vote, which is to address allowing A2L refrigerants either by within chapter 11 or simply, and this could be the answer right here, is that since the beginning of chapter 11 allows for, I think it allows for either chapter 11 or ASHRAE 15, right? And because this goes to the more stringent requirement or more stringent issue. If the more stringent thing applies, well, the more stringent thing is that A2L is not allowed in high probability systems for human comfort. Period. That's the most stringent of ASHRAE 15 or chapter 11. Separate issue from this, I'll stop here and we can move on to a vote on the standards, but just I'd like us to consider that. I'm not sure how to introduce that because it's not a current proposal.
Okay. Next up is Chuck.
Yeah, I'll echo Mark's comment. I agree that I think the easy way is to allow ASHRAE 15 for us. My concern is if we're not aligned with the fire department, they could have different requirements based on their fire code. And so even if we take, I don't want to say the easy path and adopt ASHRAE or allow ASHRAE 15 to be used for A2L refrigerants, then I reached out to the head of fire prevention, Tony Carroll, earlier this week, and A2L refrigerants were not on his radar as an update in 2024. So it's something that we would need to coordinate. And I know he was concerned that being this far in their code committee, I mean, our code committee was intentionally heard later in the process, that the other code committees are actually wrapping up right now. So that definitely is a hurdle we need to figure out how to address if this gets passed.
Okay, thanks for that input. Donna, go ahead.
Yeah. Another option, and I don't like to do this very much, but in this one instance, I might suggest that we table this. I think the proponents had got kicked out too, so I just let them know they can try to.
Okay, great. We got a few of them are back. Let's see, we're still waiting on some committee members to come back.
Yeah. It's
how
hard
about this?
because when you first try to log in, it says you have another meeting in progress. That's the message we get. And so I just leave it up there because I know this is not the first time. If I leave it up there, it'll eventually let me back in. But I think some other people like try to get out and get back and get out and get back.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, same thing happened to me. I don't know why Zoom kicks us out every now and then, but it does. So let's do this. That item number, let's see, we were on P9.1 is still open. We're under the discussion period. Let's take an 8-minute break. We're about halfway through anyway. We'll come back. That'll give people an opportunity to sign back on. I'll put a timer up on the screen, and then we'll continue on. So go ahead and feel free to turn your cameras off. Do what you need to do. I'll put a timer up on the screen. We'll be back in 8 minutes.
Can you, Kevin, just put it like a Word document that says we're taking a break so that the people that logged out or got kicked out we'll know.
Absolutely. Can you see my screen? Did I share? Did I reshare? Okay, good. Good. Okay, if you can hear me, let's start coming back. Hopefully we get quorum back here. That would be nice if we can get quorum.
Who did we have before that we don't have now?
See, we lost Gary, Matt.
Okay.
And Brian Kennedy.
Hmm. Let's see.
I'm gonna send them a quick note.
Okay.
We'll extend our break a little bit.
Hmm.
I just sent them a note.
Come on, we just need one more. I think I figured this one out finally. We won't have to table it.
All right, it looks like we got Gary back. That's great. Gary? And I think we need, what, one more to make more than 50%?
Well, it depends on if it's 50% of the voting members or 50% of the committee. If it's 50% of the voting members, we have 10 voting members, right? And so we would just need 6.
Yep, so we need one more.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Who are we missing from before?
Brian and Matt Edwards, Brian Kennedy and Matt Edwards.
Maybe we can email them.
He did email them once.
Okay.
Did they return after everybody got kicked out?
No. They might have thought it was just them.
You can email Brian real quick.
Yeah, because yeah, we have 6. And if it's 50% plus 1 of the voting members, then we're good to go with 6. But if it's 50% of the entire committee, that is 11 members, and we would.
Shauna, I'm only counting five. I don't count 6 votes. We have Michael, Chuck, Danny, Gary, and Mark.
On Carlos? Oh, sorry, you're right. That is our note
Charlie.
taker.
He's our note taker. I'm sure he would like to vote
Gotcha.
so we can move forward.
Sorry, you're right. Okay, I was seeing that person on there. I think last time next to his name it had that he was an alternate host or whatever, and this time it doesn't say that. So, there you go. Okay, there's Matt. Woo!
All right.
We're rolling.
It looks like he still has to connect to audio here. Give him a
And
minute.
Brian.
But okay, we got them both. Sweet. All right.
Woo!
Apologies.
Was
Not sure
that-
why that happens, but back to where we left off. Shauna was proposing something as a subject matter expert. Shauna, you want to pick up where we left off there?
Sure. So at first I was going to propose that because there was a lot of conversation about how adopting the 2024 standards in the 2021 codes that don't reference those certain refrigerants, how that might work in the fire department, and do we have conflicts there, was going to propose that we table this item to the final hearing so that we have a chance to talk to the fire department, have a chance to see if there's really any issues and bring it back. However, I have an alternate to that. Wondering if the proposal is needed at all. If the proponents said, and I have to follow along with my logic, that the proponents said that these were also updated in ASHRAE 15-2019. And if that is the case, the 2021 in 1101.1.1, I don't know if, I mean, I could share my screen, but in 1101.1.1 says that refrigerants other than ammonia that will comply with this chapter 11 and ASHRAE 15. So it's already sending us to ASHRAE 15. And then when you go to chapter 15, which is the reference standards, it references ASHRAE 15-2019. So if we already have in the 2021 base code that isn't amended by Denver, because I looked through their amendments right now, we have a reference to ASHRAE 15 and ASHRAE 15-2019, and in ASHRAE 2015 or ASHRAE 15-2019 already has these updated. Maybe we don't have to necessarily either worry about it, or maybe it's okay if we do go forward with the update because we're using ASHRAE 2015 that's already been updated as well. But I want to either ask the proponent, is all of this really covered in 2019 of ASHRAE 15? Or should we, maybe we need to table this, ask Chuck if we should just table this and look at it further, either that or disapprove it so that we don't have conflicts. I just want to make sure that we're really, really covered and we're not causing an unintended consequence by anything.
So I'm going to move to table it because the section you quote 1101.1 says this chapter and ASHRAE 15. And so the fact that this chapter doesn't really explicitly allow it, we would have to lean on that chapter. I mean, as a jurisdiction, we could obviously just allow it, but I think it'd be better to have an amendment that specifically allows ASHRAE 15 to be exclusively used for A2L refrigerants. And then, so I don't know if that's going to be an exception to that or not, but then the big caveat to that is, I believe there was amendments to the fire code and possibly the building code in 2024 regarding these refrigerants. And so even if the mechanical code in this committee, we just put our blinders on and to cover our bases, there's a chance that we're going to create a conflict.
Yeah, and I served on both the fire and the building for this cycle. And so I like the idea of tabling it just so we can go back and make sure all the bases are I really like that idea. I mean, I hate to just say flat out disapproval, but I like the idea of tabling also.
No, and this is these A2L refrigerants are going to be an important step in the future. It's the future of what we're going to be designing to, reviewing to, et cetera. And so we need to give a path to allow them to be used and regulated appropriately. So I move to table this and try to cover our bases before the next code committee hearing.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
I didn't catch who that was.
Brian.
Brian, okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Mark, go ahead.
Yes, first of all, we can address this further. One of the questions I will have, and this is going to be for the Denver enforcers here, is how can you use ASHRAE 15 as a continuing maintenance standard? You may be familiar with that. In other words, there is the 2019 version that was published in 2019, yet there's been amendments, addenda, since that date, and there will be every 6 months, essentially. One of the things that does is they include the new refrigerants that have been promoted and established. Can the city and county of Denver look at, you know, the most current, even though it hasn't even been written yet, it hasn't even been approved, will they be able to look at the most current 6 months from now?
Okay.
And I could just,
Shauna?
I would just answer that by saying right now it is giving ASHRAE 2015 or ASHRAE 15-2019, and it's not getting date specific. So it's always the most recent version on that. Usually if there's concern about future proposals that we don't get to look at, they'll put a date specific. As of, you know, July 1st, 2020, then it'll say, then you can only do ASHRAE 2015-19 up to that point. And not anything after that. So right now it doesn't have a date specific under ASHRAE 2015. So it's a most current version.
Okay, any other discussion? Being none, I will call a vote. So this is to be tabled with a second. I believe the next hearing is May the 4th. So that would be the date for anybody that's interested, that when we would hear it again. So all those in favor, Mark, I'm gonna go ahead and lower your hand because I don't know. There you go, good, thanks. All those in favor of tabling, please raise your hand. 7, okay. Go ahead and lower your hands, it's unanimous. Okay, so that brings us up to the next proposal. Item P14, and that is David. David, I don't believe, is with us. Anybody from CCD want to give us a summary on that?
Yeah, I can speak to this.
Okay.
So this proposal is mainly just a cleanup. The base code references section 513 for smoke control, and in Denver, we pretty much eliminated most of 513 and through amendments and reference 909 of the fire code. So this is just correcting a pointer in code, essentially.
Can I point out it's just something we need to fix in printing. Right now, under the exception, they're adding the underlined Denver Building Code amendments, IFC section 909. Right before that, it says, in accordance with section, that word section should be deleted as well, right? Yeah. So it says in accordance with, yeah, that's my only comment on this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'll go to the general public. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support of this, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support, please raise your hand. Third and final call, anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll go to opposition. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Anybody from the general public wants to speak in opposition? Third and final call, anybody that wants to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll go back to the committee. Committee, this is your time for questions. Any questions from the committee? Third call for questions. Seeing none, we'll go to discussion. Committee, this is your time to discuss and or make a motion. Anybody want to make a motion? Matt, your hand's up first.
I guess I just wanted to ask, so 513 has to be coordinated with 909. It's not struck. Isn't that correct? So the way I read the amendments are, the entirety of section 513 is still in the code, but you have to coordinate that with section 909.
Correct.
Right. So I'm thinking that, the code as written prior to this proposal is still correct, right? I mean, this would just simply bypass 513 altogether, right? So I'm wondering if this is really necessary. So, if you read this as you have to go in accordance with section 513, that still takes you to Denver Amendments, section 513, which tells you that you have to coordinate with section 909. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the intent of this proposal was to avoid that going to 513 and then going to 509, coordinating with 509.
Just avoids a step, right? Right now you would say go to 513. You get to 513 and it sends you to 909. So this just sends you to 909 without having to go to 513.
Right. I think it adds a step to do so, though, right? We have to add this amendment in order to skip the other step. I guess I'm just wondering if it's needed or not, or if this is causing enough confusion that it's necessary to put in. So.
Sure, we'll let everybody ponder that. We got some other hands up in the meantime. Brian, go ahead.
It's similar to Matt's question. It's section 513 still exists in the code, right? So nothing. I mean, you still have to review section 513 and IFC 909 both, correct?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So 513 exists. Only thing that when you get to 513, it says anything with the letter F next to it, which means it's heard by the Fire Code Committee. Sends you to 909. So if there are things in 513 that don't have the letter F, they would still exist. But it's smoke control, and I think it all has an F. I'm looking through there right now. There's nothing without the letter F next to it. So it would all go to 909.
Okay, next hand up is Michael.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Matt. I don't think this is really necessary. And quite frankly, it's self-explanatory.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion, or did I miss that? Anybody want to make a motion? Second call.
I'll make a motion to disapprove. I don't think it's necessary.
All right.
I'll second.
Is there a second? Okay. Sounds like I think that was Chuck that seconded. Okay. Any discussion? Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. This is to disapprove. All those in favor of disapproval, please raise your hand. I have 7. That's unanimous. Okay, go ahead and lower your hands. Okay, next item of business. Let me close this out. And we voted earlier that we're going to hear P15.1 and item number 1 together. So what we'll do is I will introduce 15.1, let Anna give us a summary on that. And then I will go through the public comments, and then I'll open up item number 1, let Chuck give us a summary and go through that.
I'm sorry,
Maybe
maybe I confused it. My thing was, they don't have to be heard together. This is like, and then voted on. Like, I just didn't want there to be an item in between them. So heard next, just move item number 1 up after 15.1, or move P25 after number 1, so that so that we could hear anything ventilation right next to each other. I don't know that they have to be heard together.
Great. Okay, so then we'll just move on to 15.1. Anna, let's unmute you. And please introduce yourself. And while I pull up your proposal, just give us a summary on that.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
My name is Anna McCullough. I am a building performance engineer with Group 14 Engineering. And we put together this proposal item 15.1, and we had some good discussion with Shauna and some of the committee members through email today, and have decided to withdraw this proposal in lieu of the existing language within the 2021 IMC section 401.
Okay, great. I don't believe we need a vote on it since the proponent is pulling it down. So anything else you want to add?
I guess I would just ask Denver to give their intent as far as this is concerned, because there's a current amendment to 401.2, but in the discussions today, they wanted to go with the baseline 401.2. So I can modify that baseline as long as I know that's 100% their intent, that they just would rather go with the baseline than the current amendment.
Okay. Don't know if we have anybody that would speak on that from Denver.
Yeah, the baseline.
Mark, go ahead.
Oh.
Mark's hands up. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm not, can't speak to Denver's intent. What I can speak to is this was a good opportunity to clarify what the code actually says. And yeah, the problem was that the proposal language did not use the current code language to modify. The interesting thing is that the current code language, the 2021 base code, essentially says that, well, I can quote, it says, dwelling units complying with the leakage requirements of the IECC or ASHRAE 90.1 shall be ventilated by mechanical means. I can translate that into, more practical language, and that is, if the building complies with code, thou shalt use mechanical ventilation. So why don't we just cut to the chase and say that every occupied space, dwelling units shall be ventilated with mechanical means. It's like, I don't know why what they're trying to hide here, but if it complies with the code, you have to use mechanical means.
That's exactly what it's saying. I put that into the 2021 IECC, so I can tell you that that's exactly what they're saying, is that if you're under an energy code, because there are some people who don't adopt the energy code, that's why we had to word it that way. If you adopt an energy code and you're complying with the energy code, you have to do mechanical ventilation for your dwelling unit. And I think it'll be more covered in the next proposal coming up, number 1. But you're right, that was our discussion with Anna today, was you're modifying the 2018 language instead of the 2021, and that's why she withdrew it. I just wanted to make sure if she withdraws it, there's no other proposals coming forward for 401.2. Denver has a current amendment for 401.2, And I just want to, but in our discussions, we said, let's just go with the base code language that's in the 2021. And so that's what I just want to make sure that we are doing. And so I think that's what Chuck was going to clarify.
No,
Go ahead, Chuck.
yeah, I agree. I think the 401.2 base code covers our intent. The model code is obviously requiring exhaust or mechanical ventilation in dwelling units, and we're going to maintain that. And so I think 401.2, the way it's stated in 2021 IMC is good for us.
Okay, so being that the proponent has withdrawn, we will close this out. We will not vote on it. Thank you, Anna, for being present and letting us know on that. We will move forward. So now we will open up item number 1. And Chuck, I believe this one is yours, if you want to give us a summary while I pull it up.
Yes, thanks, Kevin. So this is a long proposal. It modifies multiple sections, but the intent is currently 2021 code is moved to require ventilation, mechanical ventilation in all dwelling units. But there's still the delineation between 3 stories and less and 3 stories or more, which for us from a practical standpoint doesn't make sense. And so we're going to just modify it so all dwelling units are ventilated the same way, which we think will help the design community in Denver. Stepping through the sections real quick. 401.4, there's the model code is now added if there's a manufacturer fitting that has exhaust and intake in the same fitting, that you can use it and reduce the clearances needed between the intake opening. And the model code adopted and as approved and approved fitting. And when using code language, approved means like Mark would need to call me and say, hey, does this fitting, or do you approve this fitting? So it's more of an authority having jurisdiction approval. So we struck that and just made sure it was just a factory built intake and exhaust combination. Going to 401.3 or 403.1. Yeah, 403.1, dyslexic. So we're going to require mechanical exhaust or mechanical ventilation units, and we're going to eliminate the exhaust only option. And so now the units will need to have a supply and return or exhaust system. So a balanced system will be provided to the units. 403.3 removes the 3 stories or less dwelling unit. So it just drives all of the units to the section 403.3.2 section for ventilation rates. And then when you get to the ventilation rates, the IMC uses 0.01 times the area of the floor, where ASHRAE 62.2 uses 0.03 times the floor area. And so we went with the more conservative number on that. And ASHRAE is a more, I would say, recognized standard. So we went with ASHRAE on that. And then we modified exception number 2. Since we're requiring balanced ventilation, we struck that portion out of the exception and now allow the designer to reduce the ventilation rate by 30% if they have a system that's ducted to each bedroom and at least one of either the living room, dining room, or kitchen. And then finally, in Chapter 5, there's similar language as what's required in the intake requirements, that if you have a manufactured device, you can have for residential units, you can have a less clearance, the intake and exhaust. And that's also intended to help with energy recovery units, the use of energy recovery units used. So that's a quick summary of this needed amendment.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. We have our subject matter expert, Shauna, that wants to bring something up.
Yeah, no, so I worked pretty extensively with the proponents on this, and we did a lot of research of what was going on at the national level and into the 2024. First, I would bring up when it comes to the 3 stories or less or 4 stories or more, that really for Denver really only applies to your R3s and R4s, because Denver has amendments in their energy code that make R2s a commercial building anyway. So it didn't matter if they were 3 stories or less or 4 stories or more, they all had to comply with the commercial requirements. So it really was only it really is a bigger change for the R3s and R4s. And that's just saying that now they all have to get mechanical ventilation, which if they were built under the IRC, those are, instead of being an R3, if it was built under the IRC, it'd have to get mechanical ventilation. So it's not a huge change. But I would say that also this change in the rate from the 0.01 to the 0.03, that got changed at 2024. And I'll be honest, I fought against it, but I lost. And so this is what's going to be in the 2024. This is the way it's moving. This is having it apply mechanical ventilation, balanced ventilation, and at this different rate is what you're going to see in the 2024. And so I would just offer that up to you.
Thanks, Shauna. Okay, we'll move to the public portion of this. Anybody from the general public that wants to speak in support, please raise your hand. I will, how about this? We'll forego public comments because we have nobody attending on the public side anymore. Just to save us all some time here. As soon as we get one person to join, I'll go back to that. But all right, committee, this is your time for questions. Any questions? Michael, your hand's up first.
Yeah, I do have a question with the word balance. Does that imply that if you're putting 50 CFM into the space, you have to exhaust 50 CFM? That's my first question. And then the second is, there's a bunch of other amendments on the 19 code. How are those going to get modified? So anyway, so I just got 2 questions basically.
I don't know if you want to answer that, Chuck, or you want me to answer that?
No, I mean, I think the idea is that it should be, there can be some pressure differential, and that's allowed in the other sections of the code. But the intent was to require supply, that there will be exhaust in the unit through the kitchen exhaust and the restroom exhaust. And so the intent is really for the supply to be provided. And there can be slight pressure differentials associated with a little bit of imbalance, but the exhaust only systems that pull ventilation or pull air from who knows where. I mean, we hope it's from the outside, but it could be from your neighbor, or from the hallway, or wherever. The intent is to require the supply. And the existing amendments will be modified to support this one. So like 401.2 will go away. And we'll use the base code 401.2.
So when we had exhaust only, I understood the reason to have the word balanced, but if we have supply, I'm not quite sure the purpose of that word anymore.
If you're looking in the code, the energy code and the mechanical code discuss balanced ventilation as being the somewhat equal amount of air going out as air coming in. So what they're trying to say is you can no longer just do an exhaust only or a supply only. You need to balance that out and have the same, roughly the same. It does give you some leniency in whether you can go a little bit negative, but it doesn't. It's not going to allow you to do a supply only or an exhaust only. You're going to have to do balanced system. That doesn't mean you have to throw in an ERV or an HRV. There are many options of how to do a balanced system. But it's just not going to let you exhaust a bunch of air and not bring in some to replace it and hope that it comes back in through the openings in the envelope. That's basically what was happening. Because the building is getting tighter and tighter, you don't want to rely on those little openings, right?
No, I understood the exhaust part. But once you supply, so there's a definition on that.
Well, but supply is the same. Well, it's just opposite, right? So if I
Yeah.
have a really tight building and I'm supplying a lot of air, I don't want to force the air out. I want to control how much air goes out.
Yeah, I mean, my definition of balance is 50 in, 50 out, not 50 in, 40 out, or 40 out, 30 in.
Yeah, well, and the balanced ventilation is actually a defined term in the IMC now. And it's, you know, any combination of concurrently operating mechanical exhaust, mechanical supply, where the total mechanical exhaust airflow rate is within 10% of the total mechanical flow rate. So it's a defined term.
Okay. Michael, does that answer your questions? It looks like
Yes.
it. Okay, Mark, your question's up next.
Okay. Yeah, again, kind of on intent. So yeah, I think I understand what you're trying to say with balanced exhaust or balanced ventilation. One of the things that is kind of typically done, and I think the reason why in the past, at least, it was allowed to have not a balanced system, is that the way many of these work is that there's a you know, a bathroom exhaust fan, you know, 403.3.2.3 does allow for 100 CFM intermittent, or in bathrooms, a 50 CFM intermittent or 20 CFM continuous. In kitchens, it's, you know, 50 intermittent and 25 continuous. So many times this is done with a intermittent exhaust fan. If you have a, you know, apartment with 2 or 3 bathrooms and a kitchen, you might have a whole combination of 50 CFM or 100 CFM fans going on and off and at different times. So is it intended that if indeed you have a total of, say, you know, 400 CFM that can be, you know, come on at different increments, that when you bring on 100 CFM fan, you bring in 100 CFM of outside air. If people happen to switch on 2 fans, you have to bring on 200 CFM. If they bring on, so is that the intent, is to, as the exhaust fans turn on and turn off, you've got to bring in more or less outside air to keep it balanced?
I don't know.
The intent was not to have a system that complex. The intent was to require supply air to be provided to the units. And then as exhaust fans ramp up and ramp down, obviously the unit won't be balanced as defined by code, which I think is a challenge. So yeah, but the intent was not to have it ramp up and down depending on how many exhaust fans are within the unit.
Can it be written so that it doesn't say that then?
Well, it depends on like which dwelling unit you're saying. So the IRC mechanical is written that way, right? That says if you're intermittent, you have to, depending on how often they come on, you have to increase the amount of CFM. If you're continuous, you have less CFM. Right.
That's just for the supply, or the exhaust.
Yeah.
It's just for the ventilation air. And so, yeah, I'm looking at it now because I don't think the intent was to have it every system completely balanced. The intent was to require supply.
Okay.
And
so next question. Oh, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Well,
question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it does make my head hurt as a engineer to talk about supply in this situation. It's not what you really want. What you want is outside air. You can have, these are dwelling units. It's probably going to be served by a fan coil. It might be served by 1,000 CFM fan coil. Well, the front end of that fan coil is labeled supply. It doesn't matter how much air is coming out of that fan coil. It's not balancing the Gesine versus Gesada heat. What you want is outside air to come in to replace exhaust. So again, I just whenever I hear people say supply, what you mean is outside air.
All right, Danny, you had your hand up. I see it's down now. I don't know if you still had a question. You're on mute, Danny.
Okay, so
There you are.
yeah, I just want to reiterate that the intent is to make a bad situation better. The exhaust only is a problem. I agree with Mark that it doesn't have to say supply air. It could be outside air, but then you are you're not really defining balance system either. I would say that how is it being done now with supply systems? It's not balanced, but people supply outside air through a fan coil, like you said, and it's not balanced. We just want to ensure that you're not in a negative situation. You are making up that air somehow. It's not going to be balanced. There's always going to be fans turned on and off. Like you said, we don't think that you have to track the supply fan with the exhaust fans. I don't know how an ERV is going to work either with fans turning on and off. There's always going to be an imbalance. So the intent is not balance. It's just to have a non-negative situation by making up that air with outside air.
As soon as you turn on a dryer or anything else, you're going to go, you're going to change the balance. There is a definition for supply air, though. I'm just letting you know there is a definition for supply air also, and you're right, it doesn't say it's necessarily from the outside.
All right, any other questions? Let's move to the discussion point now. Anybody have any further discussion or clarification, or do you want to make a motion? Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't, unless we define balanced ventilation system as something that doesn't, well, actually have to be balanced, I can't support this, because everything, what I've heard you say is that you're trying to avoid a negative situation. So I still haven't heard how that's prevented when you've got a total of 400 CFM of exhaust fans spread out through different rooms. But you've only got, if you do the equation here, you only need about 50, 70, 100 CFM of outside air. So I don't know how you balance that 50, 70, it's a small number when you run those, when you do that equation. So how do you balance it when you're going to have a small number of outside air and a large number of total connected exhaust air?
May I ask a question, Mark? Are you familiar with, does it give you any comfort? I don't know. The IECC, the Energy Code, also requires that now in the 2021, that the ventilation gets measured and like a balance report. It now requires even on residential that you have to measure the flow coming out at whatever registers you're using or whatever device you're using for your ventilation rates, for your mechanical ventilation. That has to be a measured amount now. You have to run a flow test on it. And so that is in there also. I'm just trying to figure out your concern over the balance. And so I'm just, I know that the 2021 has several different moving parts, but it's between the energy code and the mechanical code. And so I'm trying to pull it all together to answer your question.
The question is 400 CFM of exhaust and 100 CFM of outside air balanced?
It may not be balanced, but it's better than it was. So I don't know how to word that either without, making it so complex.
What was changed? When you added the word balanced in there, what changed from that situation where today I can have 4 100 CFM fans that turn on and off and only have a 50, 70, 100 CFM of exhaust of makeup air. I know what this says, but what it says that I need to have 400 CFM of outside air.
Yeah, there's no requirement now for makeup air, right?
Right.
So we're trying to address that the best we can.
The way I can tell you that in the energy code, I mean, I've been sitting nationally on that committee for so many years, that what changed is when you have, right now, the code allows exhaust only or supply only or balanced. When you use exhaust only and you're exhausting out 100 CFM, it's forcing it through the envelope or forcing it through whatever holes you have in the building in. So it's an uncontrolled amount and you're forcing it in order for the building to keep a neutral pressure. When you have a supply only, you're forcing air into the building and not exhausting out. And so you're forcing it through the envelope. When they talk about balance in the energy code, they're saying bring in a controlled amount of supply and a controlled amount of exhaust so that you're not forcing anything through little holes in the envelope that will become big holes in the envelope. That's one thing. And then when it says balanced ventilation, like Chuck said, there's a definition in the IMC that's for balanced ventilation. It has to be within 10%. So you couldn't do 400, 100, right? Like it has to be within 10% of each other. So the balanced meant you can't do supply only or exhaust only. You have to do a balanced, bring in a controlled amount of each, and then they have to be within 10% of each other.
And therefore, for that by situation, you need 400 CFM of outside air when you have 400 CFM of exhaust.
If the table or the formula tells you need 400 CFM, you calculate what CFM you need based on the formula. Or
well, the formula will give a very low number for outside air. It will give a number in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 CFM, depending on how many bedrooms you have, right? And how large the floor plate is. But it's still that kind of number, 50, 100 kind of CFM. Yet every time you put in a bathroom fart fan, it's going to be 50 CFM. Just one bathroom fart fan is going to be 50 CFM. And if you have 2 or 3 of those, you're going to have an imbalanced situation.
Okay, we will, Mark, I think you're getting across here. We got several other hands up, so let's keep a little bit order here and see if we can get everybody else's comments going, but I appreciate that. Michael, you're up next.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to say anything new, but I'm going to go ahead. So there's one issue, I think Danny kind of touched on it, and I think that's the intent too, is so let's say we have a 1,000 square feet residential unit, and I'm just going to say is 70 CFM of outside air. And that needs to be balanced to the 70 CFM. And obviously, we need to make sure that 70 CFM is provided. And that usually it happens with no fans on. Now, when I see the word balance, and I see the definition within 10%, it implies that if we're putting 70 CFM in, I need to have 60 CFM out. Otherwise, obviously, it's imbalance. And then once we take it a step farther, kind of like what Mark was saying, if I run the dryer and the kitchen fan and the 2 bathrooms, all of a sudden I'm at the 400 to 500 CFM range, and I'm in balance and not compliant with the code. So And I think the intent of the code is to have the outdoor air to the units, and that can be accomplished with the code as written without the word balance, in my opinion.
Okay.
And obviously,
Michael.
and the reason I'm bringing that up, and it's a true example, you know, when another engineer gets hired to review a project, they go straight to the code and basically they read the word balance and they kind of put this out of compliance. Now, we do know what we discussed today among ourselves, but by reading that, it would be very difficult for me to comply with code with the word balance right now to design a building.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Next hand up is Matt.
Yeah, so, you know, I wanted to return to what the base code says, because the base code talks about outdoor air for dwelling units. It does not use the word balanced. It talks about a system consisting of mechanical exhaust supply or combination thereof. I think the apprehension with that is the exhaust side. We don't want this to simply be exhaust only. We want to provide a supply system to balance all of these exhaust fans that are otherwise required by the code. We're going to have to put kitchen exhaust in. We have to exhaust the toilet rooms. We have to exhaust all these spaces we were just talking about that are so troublesome because we put them on switches and then the amount of exhaust leaving the unit changes all the time. When you read just the base code, it doesn't put us in the bind that we're in right now with that word. And it does include the verbiage of using mechanical exhaust, which I think it would be fair to, with the history of using exhaust only systems in Denver, I think designers are looking at that and saying, okay, well, this says I can still use exhaust. That's not what we want here. I think that's what my take on the intent is. We don't want that. We want to have a supply system in place, knowing that we have all these exhaust flows that are going to happen anyway. So what I wanted to try to bring up here is the possibility of using the base code with less change to it. Essentially use the base code language, but simply remove the exhaust system option. And I can type something here and put it in the chat if others would like to see what I have in mind.
Okay, thanks, Matt, for that idea. We'll let the committee ponder that. We have some other hands up. Chuck, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with Mark, Michael, Matt. I agree. And Danny, the intent was not to require a balanced system that's, being able to modulate with exhaust fans turning on and off. The intent is to require a supply. And so I think, speaking to Matt's recommendation of just dropping the exhaust system, I think we can pretty much leave all the edits shown, but then 403.3.2.1, drop the balance system, every reference to balance in that section, and just leave the outdoor air that's in the base code. And we get to what the intent is, because the intent really isn't to over design this and make it impossible to comply or in the city of Denver with units. The one challenge I have is, well, not challenge, but so in 403.1, the ventilation system in the base code, it says the amount of supply air shall be approximately equal to the amount of return and exhaust air. That's in the base code, and it sort of hints at a balanced system, but doesn't prescribe per the definition of a balanced system. And that would be enforced with reason, and I think designed to with reason, but it's not to the strict definition of a balanced system. So it's sort of there in code moving forward. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what Danny has to say.
Right. Well, actually, could I comment on that just briefly, Chuck? The section that you're talking about, I think, is 403.1, where it talks about amount of supply air being approximately equal to the amount of return exhaust or exhaust air. The where I think this gets, for dwelling units specifically, there's another subcode section, I think, that, and that's the one that I just put into the chat to kind of to dispel that a little bit, to make it say here for dwelling units, the intent is provide mechanical supply. Other ventilation systems where you don't know if you're going to have those exhaust flows, then you do need to focus on making sure it is balanced. Does that make sense? They're kind of two different, that other section of the code is talking about a wider group of applications.
Yeah, no, and that's what I mentioned, that I think in that 403.3.2.1, we should drop the balanced from there. And
Yep.
so I'm reading yours now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry to speak out of turn.
Oh, no. It's meant to be a conversation.
Okay, so yeah, let's get Danny. I know, Danny, your hand's been going up and down. Danny, do you want to say something? You're on mute if you do. Danny, you're still on mute. There you are.
Huh. So every time I raise my hand, somebody speaks and answers exactly what I was going to say. So that's why I keep raising and lowering my hands. I agree with what everybody has said so far. Balanced is a problem. We need to get rid of that. And exhaust is a problem. We need to get rid of that. So I like what Matt just wrote and what everybody spoke. I'm in total agreement so far.
Cool. Great. So is there any other discussion, or does someone want to make a motion? We can, since it seems like we're getting somewhere, I would like to see if someone wants to make a motion to make some edits here. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve with modifying and removing the word balance.
Okay. Let me get those going here. So removing these two in item 403.3.2.1, deleting the two words balanced. Okay, is there a second on that?
I second that.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Any other discussion? Any other modifications? Chuck,
Would I
go ahead.
I should raise my hand.
But I think we need to, I guess a ventilation system is sufficient. Yeah,
This
no,
section here, 403.1.
yeah, no, I was looking at 403.3.2.1, just removing the word balanced. If that's, and then just leaving it the ventilation system. I think that covers it.
Okay. Matt, you're up next.
Well, I guess I was just going to, I know we have a motion and a second here, but the section that I put into the chat was intended to be sort of a lesser modification to the code as opposed to a rewrite. So, I suppose if the group agrees that simply removing the word balanced says the same thing, and that meets what we're trying to say, then that would make sense to me. My thought was to try to maintain fidelity to the base code, but.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second from Michael and Danny. So let me, just for simplicity, let me put that on the screen just so everybody can see. And again, this isn't a motion, but just so you all can compare side by side what Matt was wanting, or potentially wanted to put in there versus. So go ahead and read that over, and if anybody wants to have it. Chuck, I see your hand still up. I don't know if you had a further comment or not.
Nope.
Nope. Okay, so I'll give you an opportunity to kind of read that over. Brian's hand's up. Brian, go ahead.
So, am I correct? The base code says an outdoor air ventilation system, and we would be striking the outdoor air portion of the code. Is that correct?
Matt, was that your intent on this when you were writing it?
No, let me go back to that section.
Oh, I see what you're saying, Brian, and I think it does make more sense to strike the balanced and add the outdoor air that is struck in the proposed language. But
Right, yeah, the base code language says an outdoor air ventilation system consisting of a blah, blah, blah. So.
So Matt, your intent to, on this specific one that you put in the chat was to keep the outdoor air as part of it?
Correct, in alignment with the base code.
Okay, so Brian,
and it's sounding like,
hopefully.
It's sounding like if they want to, and the way I'm understanding it, Kevin, is if they want to go with what Michael proposed or whoever proposed, where they just strike the word balanced. If they strike the word balanced in that proposal, they bring back in the words outdoor air.
Sure, and I want to make sure that that was the intent on that. So Michael, go ahead.
I don't like where it says that it needs to be connected to the return air side of an air handler, because that's usually not the case. So usually in the residential units, we just put the grill above the door with an airflow, with an outlet valve. So it doesn't necessarily need to go to the retainer side of the air handling unit.
Yeah, and Michael, I think my read of that is that's one of the options, is you can have it go direct to the space, or you can have it go direct to the return side of the air handler. I guess I read that as you could do either, and it would be in compliance.
If it's not in the base code, I don't know that we need to give it a specific. I mean, we just need to deliver it to the space, because after that, we're calling, there's another section where you can deliver to each room too.
Right, yeah, and that sentence where it says local supply systems, including outdoor air ducts connected to the return side of an air handler, are permitted to service such systems, that is in the base code. So it's essentially saying that if you were to take your residential fan coil and duct it to the outside, that would suffice. You don't have to use a duct from an ERV or some other system or another fan system that's direct to the space.
Okay, so you all had an opportunity now to read what Matt was trying to get across. However, there is a motion with a second for this section that's highlighted instead. So unless Michael or I believe it was Danny that made the motion and second wanted to withdraw their motion, that would be the motion we would vote on.
Yeah, I'll withdraw the motion and let somebody else.
I second that.
Okay. All right. So let me, we would do this. Well, I guess since it was withdrawn, we need another motion for somebody to add this content into 403.3.2.1.
So I moved to modify 403.3.2.1 to include what's on screen now.
Okay. Is there a second? Mark, I see your hand raised.
Second.
Okay. So I'll delete that. Any other discussion on that? Mark, go ahead.
Yes, what we just did here with this, and I concur, is that it used to be possible to simply put in an exhaust, you had to run that number of Q equals, it used to be 0.1 times. Anyway, came up with that number, and it might have been 75 CFM. All you had to do before was put in a 75 CFM exhaust fan. Now, I think it's clear to me that you've got to put in 75 CFM. I'm still going to call it outside air. It ain't supply air. It's outside air. And so that's what we've done. What we haven't done is said that is prevented this space from going negative when you start flipping on exhaust fans. And I'm okay with that because we have also said that we're trying not to get it too complicated. I think what you'll find is that due to the IECC requirements for energy recovery units, you're gonna have to come up with at least a baseline amount of exhaust at all the time, so that you have something to suck heat out of. I think the end result is going to be that if you have a 75 CFM exhaust outside air requirement, most people are going to end up putting in a 75 CFM constant exhaust through that ERV. So other designers, what are you seeing there? What will you do?
Well, yeah, and I think you hit it, Mark. So when you have an ERV in a situation like this, I think you're going to be pushed towards going away from intermittent fan operation. You're gonna need a base amount that doesn't fluctuate very much, because the ERV doesn't like imbalanced airflows as it is, right? So we have to make sure those flows match up to one another. So it's probably not going to be 70 CFM you'd put into that dwelling unit. You may have to put in 200 or something in order to balance the flows that are coming back out. So
that's good.
I definitely,
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then in smaller situations, let's take the 2-story residential building. This is, part of my concern with this was inadvertently adding cost to projects that, like smaller buildings that aren't intended to carry the cost of an ERV, or buildings that simply there's just not ERVs that are made that small. There's that issue as well. So something like this would let you put in a fan coil with outside air ducted to a perimeter louver, perhaps, so you can get that ventilation air to come into the space while still doing switched exhaust fans. This isn't telling you that you have to balance those airflows in a way that's very difficult to do. So in those smaller systems, you're still going to be required to provide that amount of ventilation, but it doesn't preclude you from putting in exhaust fans that come on in combinations that may or may not make the space go negative.
Okay, any other discussion before I call a vote?
Well, I guess my question is sort of what Michael was hinting at with the local supply systems, including outdoor air ducts connected to the return side of the air handler, are permitted to serve such a system. So it's kind of giving an example of one solution to the problem and not identifying other solutions. And so I guess my question is, do we need that sentence? Does this section stand on its own without that sentence?
I guess speaking from my perspective, Chuck, I don't think we need to introduce all the other options, and really for fear of them being interpreted as the only options. I think this sentence is good in that it tells you that you don't have to provide some other fan system to achieve this method. So again, back to that, that 2-story residential building. This would say you don't have to go buy a fan system or an ERV or something to provide that amount of ventilation air. You can simply duct something to the return side of the air handler and let it pull in the outside air for you, so you can keep it simple that way. I guess my read of this doesn't, I wouldn't be missing out on other options when I read it this way. This would just tell me that, okay, I can do this particular one.
I didn't raise my hand, but I read it and it seems to me that it's hinting that that's what we need to do. And I think we need to leave it up to the designer to decide how it's going to introduce the fresh air to the space. He can do it in many different ways. We don't really need to give one option or 10 options, in my opinion.
Okay. Chuck, your hand's up next.
I'm on mute. So I want to add one comment to that because Shauna mentioned it and it just dawned on me. The prescriptive path of the 2021 IECC requires ventilation for dwelling units to be provided through an ERV. And so, what's that?
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on mute. Only for climate, it requires an ERV for climate zone 7.
Not for
I don't know, I'll have to go look at it.
I thought the prescriptive path required ERV in our climate zone. And then you could, but it wasn't required. It's not mandatory. So if you use a performance path, it's not required. So you can use the energy model to get out of providing an ERV.
That's right.
And so my concern would be with this sentence, there's a possible code conflict because there's situations where you wouldn't be allowed to just do this solution. You'd have to provide an ERV.
Okay, Brian, I saw your hand go up, but it went down. Maybe things are addressed. Okay, seems to be the going rate here. Everybody is thinking the same way on things. So we'll move to the next one, which is Shauna.
I just have a question because the first sentence is got me puzzled. It says an outdoor air ventilation system. What is that? Right. So it says that it's a mechanical supply system. So an outdoor air ventilation system consisting of a mechanical supply system. That's the only thing that makes up the outdoor air, right? It seems like there's something missing in there. An outdoor air ventilation system consisting of a supply system. Maybe including a, that includes a supply system. I don't know. There's just something in there that is.
Yeah, and Shauna, where I come up with that is taking the base code language and striking the exhaust option. I think that what you're picking up on is there were two options in the base code. There was exhaust or supply. So, yeah, I think this.
But could it say consisting of a supply system or a supply and exhaust or something? I mean, it just is, right now it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Outdoor air ventilation system shall be installed for each dwelling unit.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Sorry, we jumped out of turn there.
And the main reason is because if you're in 403.1, the very first sentence says mechanical ventilation shall be provided by a method of supply air and return or exhaust air. So it's already going to require both, not one or the other, because you struck out the exception.
Okay, so Matt and Mark, since this is your motion in a second, are you okay with deleting that highlighted portion of it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then Michael, your hand's up next.
Oh, I was going to say that I think there's an amendment to that the air needs to be heated, and that can get a little bit. I think it was in the last code cycle that you cannot introduce raw air.
Michael, your audio cut out quite a bit there. I don't know if your book covered up your
sorry.
microphone or what.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, sorry. I believe there's also an amendment that we cannot introduce raw air to the space. It needs to be heated. So we just need to take a look on that as well.
Okay. Any other comments at this time? We do have a motion on the table with and a second. So we're in our discussion period here. The motion is to approve as amended, and the amended section is highlighted here. Any other further discussion before I call a vote?
In pretty good shape. I saw where you had counted down your unit sizes.
I'll ask one more time. Any other further discussion on this?
I feel really good about this.
Okay, seeing none, I will call a vote. All those in favor as approving as amended on the screen, please raise your hand.
As well as kind of all the meeting rooms in the site on level 2. We kind of want to serve this at trial.
All right, I have 7, so that's unanimous. Okay, thanks for that. Lower your hands. We are right at 5. That never happens that we end exactly at 5. Sometimes it's before, sometimes it's after. So look at that. I think it was meant to be. Well, that's the end of the hearing for today. We did get through quite a few today. We have some left over, but we do have one more code hearing left. That's May the 4th. I want to thank you all for participating today. I will end the recording, but I will stay on the line. If anybody wants to have any feedback, wants to vent, wants to say how the weather sucks or how the weather's great, that's fine too. But I'll stay on the line. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Right. No, we can put it.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks.